All right, so now we're getting into the swing of things where spring is ending, summer is getting close, which means the heat and the warmth, and all of a sudden the warm crops that haven't been really doing much will start growing out of control. So these little guys were the tomatoes, and now they're almost to the point where they can begin to be tied up to the trellis. Then becomes the loveliness of pruning these things. So this is 3-4 week planted into the soil tomato plant, and there's things that you need to make decisions on in order to maximize the growth and production of your tomato plant. So you can see we're already starting to flower, and you can keep flowers on as much as you want. And if you look at these have been on here pretty early, and they're about to go, but I'm about to clip those off simply because I don't want the amount of energy necessary to generate these fruit. I want them to be devoted into the plant to grow up and to develop that good root structure. So if we look at something like this, in terms of pruning, I'm going to take this one off. So you want to, at least I do, it benefits me more for getting that plant up to where it needs to be. Take off the flowers, and then comes the sucker game. So when you look at a tomato plant, you'll see a variety of different stems, and not all stems are the same. So if you see this is a main branch. You saw the flowers here, but in between the flowers and the main branch is going to be something called suckers. So that's what we saw in the cucumbers before. There's nothing wrong with suckers. So if you take the main stem and look at the main stem and a sunflower, you'll see the middle part of that is jutting out at a 45-degree angle. You see what's called a sucker. So this is another source of where energy can be devoted to growing with not much benefit. So we want to snip those off. I do that in the beginning and just kind of let them run rampant at the end. It's not to say that these will not produce fruit. These will produce fruit, but it's a lot of energy source to essentially develop a whole new plant when we want to focus the energy on the main stem. So in the case of this plant, you see the main stem, flower, and in the middle of that the sucker. So you want to be cutting those off so we can devote the energy where it needs to be. So I also take down the lower ones. These are the ones that have already kind of done their job to get that plant growing. I've also been sacrificial leaves that the flea beetles, looks like here, have mostly been chewing on, leaving the nice pristine newer leaves. So as these are done, I also take off these so we do not devote more energy into something like this. So you want to keep going along the way, taking out these suckers, the lower leaves, getting the growth up to there, and just once it gets up to the trellis, then you can kind of let it go. And there's one decision you want to make at this point if you're going to trellis, is how do you want to lead your plant? So you can lead your plant with your main stem here, and you can have one main leader that will then take over this whole trellis, or you can also leave a sucker and have 2 leads onto your tomato plant. So in the case, once we get up and going, this one doesn't really have one, that one's too low. But in the case of this, the sucker plant is getting very close up to this. So I'm gonna leave this plant as 2 leads instead of the one main stem. So everything else, here's another sucker main stem leaf. I'm gonna be pinching off these and the lower leaves, getting rid of everything. And you'll also see that this is another sucker just because I know how it looks. They will grow back. So suckers that I once pinched off here will grow back in another week or so. So it's also a consistent exercise you have to do to maintain this. The tomato is unrelenting in what it wants to devote its energy to, and you just have to tame it into the right areas. Here's another main stem sunleaf sucker in the back. So at this point I've taken the flower off. So there was a flower right here. And now I took all the lower leaves off. This is my main stem, this is the sucker. So as this grows up, I'm gonna have 2 main portions of this tomato plant growing up, and then that's gonna keep on going with that. So depending on how the plant looks, is whether I go 1 or 2. That one just so happened to have a large enough sucker plant to go up. The one in the back here, you see there's 2 main ones here, this being the sucker, this one being up. But you can kind of see, not all the same. This sucker might be able to get up and get going, but this one doesn't really have 2 dominant ones. I wouldn't say one leads to more versus the other. Everybody has a preference, everybody feels like it. One works better than the other one. I'll probably do a variety and just kind of assess from there, but it's difficult to assess once you get up to that point, because eventually this whole thing is going to be filled and it's very difficult to understand which is the lead, which one is the not. So I pretty much just make the decision based on how it looks. This doesn't have a good strong second sucker. It'll probably just be a main stem. This one might be just a single one. This one is certainly going to be a 2. That one's going to be a 2, and we'll see how it goes. So the path here is taking off the flowers at the early stage until they get up to a point, taking off the bottom ones and taking off the suckers. So we devote all the energy up to it, up into the main stem and into the roots. So once you have that, your plant will be good in its initial phases. You've devoted, or you've modified the plant to give it the best opportunity to be successful for later on in life. And that's what we're most interested in, because that's where we may take a loss for fruit now, but we get a larger benefit at the end of the season. So that's how I do the initial phases of tomato pruning, and we'll see how this goes throughout the season.